So we are in the midst of developing our academic master plan for 2019 to 2022. And what we're going to do today, the agenda for today, I'll talk briefly about the purpose and how we're going to use the academic master plan. Dean Leaker then is going to go through the process of how we arrived at this point, because work has been underway since September on this. And then she'll go more deeply into where we're at now, the theme teams, as we're calling them, and the kind of work that we'll be doing for the rest of today. Today is an opportunity to really hear from you in helping to shape this plan. So just to go back to the beginning, why AMP? And so AMP, Academic Master Plan, sometimes we use AMP or amping to talk about our planning process. The reason this is so important and why we launched this in the fall is because it really, the end result will help to provide a framework for academic planning and decision making. And the process of working together on it creates a shared vision for our academic future. So you can look at the Academic Master Plan as a strategic plan for academic affairs. And during the course of our academic master planning, once we have completed the portion that academic affairs faculty and staff have had an opportunity to provide input to, we'll bring it to the entire college campus and get input and feedback from them. And in the fall, the president will be launching a strategic planning process. And so this is very timely in that the time and depth we've spent looking at academic planning will help to inform strategic planning. So at the end of the day, whether we're talking about a strategic plan or an academic master plan, it becomes important because it helps the college make decisions. It guides resource allocation, and by resources we mean not just money, but people, personnel, time, which are probably as valuable or more valuable than the actual finances. So how do we focus our time and people and talent on what we think is important? It will also guide program planning as we look to enhance current programs and develop new programs, and also facilities planning. This is an academic master plan is very important prior to the development of a facilities plan, because we want the academic plan to inform how we create new facilities, how we utilize our current facilities in a better way. So it's really important that the educational plan drives the facilities plan and not the other way around. The whole process, and Kathy will talk about the team, but I want to just talk briefly about the team. We asked at the beginning of putting the team together, the charge of the team was to create a process that provided many opportunities for input. We were clear that the planning group was not it was a facilitator work group. They were not a decision-making group. And I am so impressed with the process that this group has come up with. We did not tell them how to go about this. It really developed from the people within the group, and there have been multiple opportunities for a variety of constituencies to provide input, and there will be even more coming up. So it's definitely intended to establish transparent action plans, again, so the entire college knows where we're headed in the next 4 years. And once we have goals, we can develop benchmarks. Where do we want to be in 1 year, 2 year, 4 years? And we hope the process and the the implementation of the academic master plan really enhances our collaboration, again, so that we all have, we've had input into the collective vision, and therefore it is the implementation of it is also a collective implementation. And so again, I'm excited with how things have evolved and the point we're at now. And just to let you know my role in it, I met with the committee at the very beginning, and I've gone to sessions here and there. I haven't had an active role in the facilitator work group itself. And we, as I said before, we gave them no map except a general timeline. So the work you're going to hear about today and the process that we're using today has been developed by this excellent facilitator work group. So, and Kathy will lead you through the rest.
So I'm going to start by just kind of giving a recap of where we've been up to this point. From the beginning, the facilitator work group felt like it was really essential that the AMP be an iterative process. So we knew, for example, that we didn't want to have like a big conversation in November, or maybe even 13 conversations, and then like show up 9 months later with a bouncing baby AMP. We knew that that would be like a problem. So the next few slides I'm going to take you through, and then I guess the other second part of that commitment to iteration was that we had to be transparent. We had to show how we got from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. So the next few slides, the data sets, the materials I'm going to take you through, they're all posted to the AMP sandbox, and I would encourage everyone to take a look. And if at every point you look at it and you see, wow, step 1 to step 2 was more like a humongotroid, giant, ridiculous leap, we would be certainly happy to talk to you about our thought process as we move this forward. Okay, so starting as far back in the beginning, in September at our Open Academic Affairs meeting, Provost Russell announced that we would be embarking on this grand adventure, this thing called academic master planning, which we quickly reduced to AMP. Because we felt that it was important that this be collaborative and participatory, the provost convened a group, a facilitator working group that she explained briefly. 3 members of this group were elected by the college council. Other members were responded to an open call from the provost, and then other members were appointed by the provost. So let me just quickly read the names, because they deserve to have their names up in lights. Rafael Alfanja, Tammy Palomo, Loretta Brancaccio-Taras, Chris Calianis, Mary Dawson, Annie Del Principe, Ivan Ho, Kathy Bleeker, Dawn Levy, Carrie Manifold, Janine Paladin, Rick Rapetti, and Jason Van Ora. But I sort of feel like I do them a disservice by just listing their names. I feel like I have to really tell you about the work that they've done. They've been phenomenal, and it's been an honor to work with them. Mostly what they've been is generous, and I mean that in a couple of ways. Certainly they've been generous in terms of their time and their effort. It's been a lot of work, and as the provost said, they've put a lot into sort of conceptualizing, and I mean, they don't just show up to a meeting, vote, and leave. They've done a lot of work. But I would say even more than that, they've been generous in mind and spirit, and I want to talk about what I mean. I think it can be tempting when you're talking about a big planning activity like this one, especially one that's as messy and participatory and ambitious and kind of wildly imperfect as the AMP is. I think it's really tempting to kind of be cynical or maybe even apathetic. And that kind of response too is probably even heightened when we're facing such huge challenges and when the morale and the trust at the college is not quite what we want it to be. But that's the time when we really need people to come in and to step in and participate and to engage. And that's why I really want to come back to the generosity of the AMP team. So as you can see from our group photo, they never gave in to cynicism or apathy. They approached the AMP with open minds, with insight, with fierceness, and maybe even a little bit of hope. Individually and collectively, they pushed my thinking, and I think too, they pushed the provost's thinking. In doing so, they made the AMP process and its early outcomes much, much better than they would otherwise have been. And yeah, I get that it's just a little bit extra to sort of imply that what they've done is heroic. But at the same time, their contributions, their civic engagement, their generosity, those really matter. And they matter in ways that bear directly on the AMP, and they matter in ways that go way beyond the AMP. And so for that, I really offer my heartfelt thanks to Raphael, Tammy, Loretta, Chris, Mary, Annie, Ivan, Don, Carrie, Janine, Rick, and Jason. You guys have been fantastic. Okay, sappy part over. So now on to the work itself. Beginning right after Thanksgiving and through the end of fall 18 classes, we scheduled 11 face-to-face faculty feedback sessions and 2 online feedback sessions. Over 100 faculty signed up and participated. The sessions were designed as SWOT analyses. At each session, participants were asked to assess the college's academic domain in terms of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We captured all the feedback from those sessions on flip charts, seen here neatly filed in my office. And the flip charts were in turn transcribed and transcripts emailed to participants. Then finally, we collated the 13 transcriptions into a massive aggregate document, which I started calling the Mega SWOT, much to the chagrin of my team. And then we eventually posted that to the AMP sandbox. Then in the winter module, a sort of subset of the larger AMP Facilitator Workgroup met in 2 extended sessions to analyze the raw SWOT data through thematic coding. We worked in small groups, each small group analyzing the aggregate data for one of the 4 SWOT quadrants: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We created code books for each quadrant, and then we assessed the frequency of the codes. Then, in a second extended meeting, we met to try to distill the 190 plus codes into a smaller set of overarching recurrent patterns and topics that cut across all 4 quadrants. A second criterion for further winnowing the data was its salience for our purpose, in this case the academic master plan. So for example, we omitted a lot of the codes that related to, say, the location of the college, the cafeteria, or transportation, because this didn't sort of directly fall under the purview of academic affairs. In the end, the process of data reduction led us to the creation of our 17-item AMP follow-up survey. The survey highlighted the most prominent issues that came up in the SWOT and those that might best be addressed in the context of an academic plan. That survey went out to the community in March, and we received just over 100 responses. So I'm just going to quickly go over a couple of the survey responses for you, because they have bearing on the way we ended up articulating our themes. But if you want to look at all the survey responses, those are also on the AMP sandbox. Hold on, yeah, here we are. So the first one is the student survey. This is the 5 items that related to students. What jumps out here is the large blue column and the large orange column. The blue column indicates that the respondents thought of the item as a strength, and the orange column indicates that the respondents thought of it as a challenge. So overwhelmingly, participants saw our students' diversity as a strength, but almost equally overwhelmingly, they saw things like their level of preparation as a challenge. So I'm going to come back to that when I talk about how we constructed the theme that would respond to these. So this slide looks at the items related to faculty. What jumps out here is the prevalence of orange bars, which, as you may recall, means challenge. So pretty much all the faculty, or a majority of them, identified every survey item: faculty diversity, support for faculty research, expectations for tenure and promotion or advancement, and faculty's role in decision-making. Pretty much everyone saw that as a challenge. So I'm going to come back to that too. Okay, so having analyzed, coded, distilled, confirmed, and again, looked at our data like a bazillion times, we were ready to identify the core themes. Well, almost. Up until this point, we'd focused our analysis almost exclusively on stuff that came out of the SWOT sessions. As important as that feedback is to the generation of the AMP, we also felt that we needed to set it in the context of a range of other factors that will also have a bearing on the plan. So we basically reviewed the survey responses to the AMP with CUNY's strategic priorities, with the focus of achieving the dream, focus areas of achieving the dream, and with some of the results that came out of the KCC's faculty and staff satisfaction survey. So we looked at all of that, we broke it all down, we reframed it, we sorted it, we messed it around, and finally, we came up with the 4 focus areas that'll be the cornerstone of the AMP. So I'm going to ask you to indulge me here because I want to explain these themes by focusing primarily on language. And that's not just because I'm an English teacher, although I have to confess that's a big part of it, but it's also because we were really deliberate in how we chose the language to reflect these themes. So for example, as you'll see, we chose verb phrases rather than just nouns. So as we wanted to signal that each theme was not just a container, it signifies an action and a commitment. So let me just get started here. This is the moment at the presentation where I got artistic, which usually in my case means I added animation, so let's hope this goes well. Okay. So our first theme is engaging learners where they are. As I noted a moment ago, survey respondents were very concerned about our students' preparation, their ability to pursue college-level work, and even their motivation. We did take these concerns seriously. But we were worried that the dominant language used to describe the students, especially in the actual SWOT comments, reinforced a kind of deficit model, a disproportionate emphasis on what students lacked. So we decided instead to focus on what so many of us saw as the strength of our student population, its diversity, the range of places from which students come to the college, and the range of experiences and backgrounds and identities they bring with them. We wanted to emphasize our collective responsibility to engage each one of these students in college-level learning, and to find a way to do that ethically, whatever the particular combination of strengths and challenges a given student might bring, and whatever external factors, like changes in CUNY policy, threatens or seems to threaten the ability to make engagement possible. Finally, we recognized that it would be tempting to look at this theme only in light of that moment when students first arrive at the college. And part of this is because so many of the comments had to do with students arriving unprepared. But we hope that the theme could be more broadly interpreted. We are just as responsible for engaging learners when they are at the point of graduation as we are when they first show up at orientation. Isn't that cool? Our next theme is investing in faculty agency and growth. So data from the SWOT, from the AMP survey, and some of the early reviews of the faculty and staff satisfaction survey all indicated what I would call a mid to high level of dissatisfaction, certainly at least some faculty. And that dissatisfaction can be divided into 2 broad categories. The first is a feeling of being unsupported, whether in terms of research, of work-life balance, or of progress toward tenure and promotion. The second was a kind of individual and collective sense of disenfranchisement at multiple levels and in multiple ways. So we looked carefully at these 2 faculty challenges and tried to determine what positive investment, and again here we use the word very deliberately, could actually turn those back into strengths. We decided to focus on faculty agency, broadly understood as the ability of faculty, individually and collectively, to make choices and decisions. And we also decided to focus on faculty growth, broadly understood as the ability of individual faculty to grow professionally, and the ability of faculty as a whole to grow, certainly in terms of raw numbers, but also perhaps in terms of a collective body and culture. Our next theme is resourcing teaching and learning. On the most literal level, this theme addresses those concerns that we heard a lot of in the SWOT that were related to classroom conditions, primarily in teaching and learning through classroom conditions and technology. But we hope that we'll think about the act of resourcing teaching and learning in a broader way, one that would include things like professional development, institutional reward structures, and policies and practices. And then finally, developing and renewing programs for evolving needs. This theme certainly responds to the college 5-year decline in enrollment, but it also comes directly from what we heard from you. If I'd shown you the survey responses related to the academic programs, you would see that they were kind of all over the map. Some people rated our career programs or our liberal arts programs as strengths. A slightly smaller number saw them as challenges, and a good many people saw them as both. In the SWOT data itself, we heard a fair number of concerns about the vulnerability of the liberal arts to perceived internal and external threats. We also heard some questioning, both provocative and profound, about what it means to serve the community of Brooklyn. So it was apparent to us that in any conversation about program development, it would have to include both program renewal and program development, and that both of those conversations had to take place sort of in the context of thinking about the reality and the perception of Kingsborough as a resource for Brooklyn. So those are our 4 themes. There they are. And then there's just this one final thing. Those 4 themes are the foundation, but the mortar, the thing that holds it all together, and the thing without which the plan will collapse, is equity. And so what we want to do is that any kind of action, as the theme teams start to recommend actions, you have to think about it in the context of equity. Any action we take to support this theme or develop it or grow it has to always also support and advance equity. That's kind of fundamental. We also see a little thing there says creating a climate for change. We know that this is hard work. And so as we start to think about it, how do we start to build momentum, create a sense that people are included, that this is like a communal process. So that's kind of the way we envision this. Okay, now we get to actually what comes next. This is phase 2. Most of the work of phase 2 is going to focus on the role of these theme teams. The theme teams are basically led by members of the Facilitator Workgroup who have volunteered to take this work on. And they'll comprise, honestly, anyone who's interested in participating. The basic charge of the theme teams is to create the recommendations of saying, this is what we think the college should do to advance that theme over the next 3 years. That's their role. We sort of broke down the work of the theme teams into kind of 3 phases. The first phase, which will kind of jumpstart today, is just generating ideas. Just trying to know what are all the possible options? What are all the possible ways we could engage learners where they are? The second stage is to kind of start to take those ideas and test them and contextualize them. Figure out which ones are feasible. Figure out what happens when you put that idea in the context of data, or in the context of constraints, or in the context of things that have been tried or being tried at other community colleges or other colleges. So that's the testing phase. And then then through all that testing, we're going to be asking the theme teams, you might start with 20 ideas, start to winnow those, prioritize. We've got a lot of good ideas, but honestly, these are the 5 that we think are the most important and that will most do the work of resourcing teaching and learning. So that's that. And they should be we're hoping that every team can present about 4 to 6 recommendations by June. That's the goal. So it's a kind of a rapid fire thing. So what does that mean for today? We designed today as a sort of modified charrette model. And I say modified because every time I read about a charrette, everybody says something different. And they start out by saying, oh, that other thing that you thought was a charrette, that's not a charrette. So I could only offer something that's modified. Basically, the idea is to have a kind of rapid-fire, creative, intensive burst of energy that generates lots of ideas with lots of feedback, and then lots of sort of recreation. So it's a kind of opportunity the goal today is to get out lots of good ideas. The word actually comes from, and here's I'm going to sound erudite, the French word meaning compte. And what it's based on, and I'm not sure if this is apocryphal or not, but that at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, architecture students would be like right up to the last minute preparing their designs, and the cart would be moved through, and they had to jump on the cart with their designs, and they were frantically scrambling at the last minute. So it's trying to capture that sense of getting your work done quickly, the energy, this burst of sort of panic of energy. So that's kind of what we're shooting for. One of the reasons we wanted to go with a kind of design model is because we decided to focus today's work in terms of like a design challenge, or what we're calling a what-if question. The reason we wanted to do that is to kind of get us out of the what is of the SWOT. The SWOTs were interesting, but I wouldn't say they were overwhelmingly inspirational or positive, right? There was a lot of just sort of we're stuck. And so we wanted to move past that presentism. Instead of saying, here's what it is, we really wanted to open people up to possibility. And hope that questions, like a design question, would really free our imaginations. They're not going to be the final recommendations, but we think they're a good starting point. And as I read in one of the design charrette manuals, the first part of a charrette is to dream. So that's what we're going to try to do. And let me run through that. So each we sat down together and we tried to come up with design questions that we thought would be really aspirational and would kind of reframe themes as I've sort of gone through them and as they were illustrated in the SWOT. So let me go through them. So here's the design challenge for the group that'll be working on engaging learners where they are. What if we operationalize our commitment to equity by assuming that every admitted Kingsborough student, regardless of demographic marker or academic background, is qualified with additional individualized support to successfully complete his or her academic goals? What will we need to change to act on this assumption in a way that ensures substantive learning and growth for each student? So the role, when you all get together with Annie to talk about this, you're going to be trying to think, like, what do we have to do if we were actually going to, if that is our design challenge, right? The design challenge for the investing in faculty agency and growth. What if institutional resources, structures, and practices were committed to equitable support for each faculty member's growth as a teacher, scholar, and citizen of college? What specific changes would occur, and who might benefit from them? That's the design challenge for the investing in faculty agency and growth group. For the resourcing, teaching, and learning group, what if KCC explicitly and intentionally fostered a culture of equity and excellence in teaching and learning? What specific resources, classroom spaces, educational technologies, professional development, academic support services, policies, and practices would be necessary to support that culture? And then finally, the program development group, your design challenge. What if we were to make the following promise to all Kingsborough students? Your program pathway will lead to a job with a living wage or seamless transfer to a 4-year degree. In addition, the learning you acquire in pursuit of that program will allow you to participate and thrive both in your community and in our complex global society. What changes and adjustments would we need to make to our academic programs to make good on this promise and to ensure that the promised outcomes are distributed equitably across all student groups? So those are the 4 challenges. Okay, so I know some of you had already signed up for a theme team that you wanted to participate in. You're welcome to change your mind based on that challenge. That design challenge sounded really goofy. I'd much rather do this other design challenge. So the theme team engaging learners where they are will stay here. Resourcing, teaching, and learning will be meeting in the back with Don Levy and I. I'm pitch hitting for Janine Paladin. Annie Del Principe will be leading the engaging learners where they are. The program development group will be meeting there under the direction of Lorna Brancaccio Taras. And the, the The Investing in Faculty Agency and Growth will be meeting with Chris Kalianis and Rafael Afanja in that group. So we're going to be, and what we're going to do in those groups is just take you through a design to rep process of brainstorming, feedback, all that kind of thing, and then we'll come back as a plenary and then kind of walk you through next steps. Each team leader two is also going to talk to you about how they're going to move things forward, what the next steps are. If you participate today, you are not signing in blood that you're going to continue to work with the theme team. What we really wanted to do is give you a sense of what the theme team work is, and hope to interest you in maybe joining the theme team and doing the work for it. Big point of thanking the team because they really worked fabulous. I should also thank all of you for coming on a Friday and for putting faith in this process. So thank you. I'm just going to ask each theme team leader to talk a little bit about some of the ideas that came up at their table. Each theme team leader is going to do things a little differently, so talk about their process for working with their team. And then if you're interested or you think anyone else might be interested in joining a team, please promote this. Tell them that it's not onerous, you're not signing away your life, that it's really an opportunity to contribute. So, Annie, do you want to start us off?
So we winnowed, I won't read you our whole winnowed list because even the winnowed list is still quite large, but things that came up repeatedly in our engaging learners where they are theme was offering more and different kinds of supports for students throughout their whole experience here, not just in the gateway courses, just to get over that initial hump, but throughout their experience, right? And so that might look lots of different ways. We had lots of different ideas about that, but that was sort of one category that kept coming up. We also thought that another thing that came up in different ways was taking greater advantage of and really redesigning, revamping, and reimagining the currently called SD10 course. It could be a real opportunity, right, to engage students and in different kinds of things, in more academic skills and habits, right? But also just give them tools in that class that they can really take through their experience here with them. To a degree that we think is not happening now. We also talked again in many different ways about taking greater advantage of that sort of pre-attendance phase, August. Maybe the summer in general, and maybe then the winter in general, right? Because lots of our students enter in the spring. But taking more advantage of that pre-attendance phase for different kinds of orientation, more intensive kinds. I talked about, Peter and I in different language, talked about some kind of directed self-placement thing that might happen in that phase as well. So different ideas there, but as students are entering, right, giving them more information, helping them get set up better, and making sure that they're involved in choosing sort of a path and a pace that is going to work for them, that we're not just putting them in it. Lots of other ideas came up, but those are some of the big ones that came up in different ways. And we're going to, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, our group is going to be working with resources that I'm organizing and putting on our Blackboard site for us. We're going to be reading things and commenting in collaborative documents that way, and then we're reconvening, and anybody else who wants to join us on the 31st to have a longer meeting where then we'll kind of refine these different ideas we've come up with and try to put them in the best language possible to share.
What if institutional resources, structures, and practices were committed to equitable support for each faculty member's growth as a teacher, scholar, and college citizen? What specific changes would occur, and who might benefit from them? Okay, so the recommendations that we came up with were: 1, encourage and recognize collaborations with researchers on and off campus, at CUNY and non-CUNY campuses, and in institutions and industry. Number 2, provide funds to support a faculty development plan that involves teaching, scholarship, and service. 3, engage faculty expertise in addressing and solving institutional and system issues, which we're thinking of as a think tank. 4, connect reward structures, such as reassigned time, tenure, promotion, merit increases, public recognition, etc., to teaching, research, and service expectations of faculty. And 5, community building through campus-wide events to highlight scholarship and teaching and foster interdisciplinary and faculty administration collaboration. One of the things that we liked about all our 5 statements is that in answer to the question, who might benefit from them, the answer is everybody. So we're happy about that. And our next steps are we're going to be meeting a couple of times between now and June 1st. Hopefully the whole core group will stay together, and then others will participate as well. And we're going to be providing different resources to put these statements into context so that we can continue to refine them. And then closer to the end of the month of May, we'll have a final meeting to actually come up with recommendations that we will present to the AMP group.
Don?
So our question is, what if KCC explicitly and intentionally fostered a culture of equity and excellence in teaching and learning? What specific resources, classroom spaces, educational technologies, professional development, academic support services, policies and practices would be necessary to support that culture? So we also appreciate the work and the help from the group today. Look forward to hopefully working with them and anyone else would like to join us. We also came up with a lot of smaller suggestions, still winnowing things out, but we're excited about looking to the opportunity to look inside Kingsborough and also kind of externally to other CUNY resources and other best practices and things going on out there in the wider world of teaching and learning, and bringing that back here so we can implement that as well. And some of the general kind of themes we saw, sub-themes, number one was about student learning in the context of experiential learning, and other types of expanded learning communities, other ways to make connections to improve student learning and kind of connect teaching with that learning in alternative ways. Another theme that came up here was the learning spaces, physical classrooms, thinking about also making sure that the design or the allocation of resources for classrooms follows the pedagogy. Thinking about different types of design of learning spaces that would energize and engage teaching and learning. And related to that, thinking about assignment of classroom spaces, library, thinking about how that can foster a greater or enhanced learning and priority learning and atmosphere in that sense. Also thinking about teacher and faculty development, professional development, and how we can enhance that in the sense of maybe additional development for new faculty or desire for faculty to continue having opportunities. And then related to that somewhat, this idea of recognition of teaching and excellent teaching, and how that plays in the role here we have about what it means to be a great faculty member here at Kingsborough, and how we recognize that in other ways, maybe in addition to or as alternate ways to the other traditional measures of recognizing faculty contributions. And then the last one was this idea of relating teaching and learning towards student advisement in the context of meaning whole student advisement, continual advisement for the student to enhance their learning and help facilitate the teaching process as well. So again, we're also looking forward to anyone who wants to join our additional group. We haven't formalized exactly a meeting date. May 31st might work as well for us to all meet for like a longer group. We're expecting to do some work on our Blackboard kind of shell that we have set up for some additional resources and place for us to all kind of gather and contribute ideas, and look forward to anyone wanting to join us as well.
So in our group, we had individuals work and write one idea per sticky post-it, and then we had people pair up and combine those ideas, and then we went around and asked them to explain one idea for us, and we sort of asked for feedback from the rest of the people. So we have a bunch of ideas, but some of the ones that I'd like to mention to you now, we talked about seamless transfer and articulation agreements, and both pre- and post-articulation agreements or memo of understanding, and also joint 4-year degree programs, so students work here for 2 years and then they'll be able to get a bachelor's degree and with less paperwork and stress. Employer engagement, so we thought it would be helpful for our students, that way they can look at internships, have advisory boards, so that we can hear from employers what do they expect from students, not only about their knowledge in the particular discipline or field, but also those soft skills that have become more important for students to work in the job markets. Expansion of existing programs to populations we don't currently serve, so adult learners, veterans, as some examples, and also using some of the natural resources that we have on campus, so our farm, our beach, to develop programs. Let's see where that goes. And then rethinking the messaging of liberal arts. And what does it mean for a student here to be a liberal arts major? And what are the implications of a student here majoring in liberal arts and then transferring to a four-year institution where there is no such thing as a liberal arts major? So that's a biggie, so we'll see where it goes. So we already have some data about labor statistics, because as you can imagine, for academic programs, we talked a lot about workforce and getting our students jobs. Look at some of that data, divide up these different recommendations that we currently have so it's supported by data, and we'll see what develops from there. Thank you.
So, with that, thank you, everyone. Just so you know, I'm going to be building up the AMP sandbox more, putting resources there so you can kind of look at stuff. Again, we really want to be transparent. What I'd love to do is kind of send out to the college community the design challenge questions and some of the basic answers people have come up with, because maybe that'll excite more people to join. Again, if this is something that interested you, if you know people that either might be interested in this or really, really want to have a say in something, please encourage them to just come. You can lurk in Blackboard. We don't care. We just want to make sure this is inclusive as possible. So encourage people to participate. And thank you for taking part of your Friday to come to this. And again, thank you to the fabulous team. They have worked so hard. So I'm so proud of them. Thank you.